It's always bothered me that the non-magical bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing type weapons have almost no differences during combat in D&D 5e. The designers literally group them together as being equally ineffective against so many creatures compared to the small number of creatures that are affected differently by these allegedly different damage types. And while the minimalist in me wants to just lump them all together as something like normal damage, I know it would be more fun for our big weapon system project if we instead capitalized on the cool things these different types of weapons should be able to do. So I'm going to break down 3 fun features I designed, one for each of these basic damage types, and a bonus 4th feature at the end of the video, but I need you to follow along and tell me in the comments if these ideas are cool or if they need some changes, because we're really building this system together. So before we really dive in, I have to thank you, yes, for all of your help and feedback and now 7,000 responses on our weapons survey, but also for being super supportive of our favorite dice sponsor, Only Crits. So many of you have checked out their beautiful sharp edge resin dice, their heavy metal dice, and intricate hollow metal dice, that now everyone who uses code BOB on their orders gets not 10, not 12, but 15% off. So you supporting Only Crits by buying cool dice has made it easier for everyone in our community to buy cool dice. Link below. And hey, you're gonna need some dice for all these fun new weapon features, like puncturing. This powerful piercing weapon can impale creatures in battle. A lot of alliteration there, didn't plan it that way, but I think it sounds cool. When you roll a critical hit on an attack with this weapon, and you roll an 8 or higher on at least 1 damage die, the target gains 1 level of exhaustion. Whoa, exhaustion? You mean that kind of serious condition that is seriously underused in 5e? Yes. In an epic moment, when you crit on your attack roll and you roll high damage, you impale your target with this piercing weapon, which I think can be emulated well with levels of exhaustion. I'd say levels because this could totally stack, but it's not super likely that one or even multiple player characters or monsters will be getting critical hit after critical hit and rolling 8s or higher on their damage on those crits. So we probably don't have to worry about the stacking getting out of control. And right away, you might have noticed that some popular piercing weapons like daggers and short swords can't use this feature because they can't roll 8s on their d4s and d6s, but I have a ton of other ideas for daggers and other d4 weapons to make them more fun. Many of them are actually your ideas from the survey. The d6 weapons, though, are kind of in this weird middle ground where they're not inherently weak enough to need new features, but I feel like they are too inherently weak to be able to, say, cause levels of exhaustion on critical hits. So this is one thing I definitely want your opinion on in the comments. Knowing this feature is, of course, optional. Even in our new weapon system, it's not getting tacked on to every piercing weapon with d8s or higher. Should this feature be an option for weapons that only use a d6 for damage? You tell me. And to nip some ideas, I really like keeping it based on a certain roll of the damage die, because it doesn't involve an extra saving throw or calculation. It's original, I think, and it gives us this super smooth, natural scaling where bigger, more powerful weapons with bigger damage dice, like the pike with a d10 and the lance with a d12, are automatically more likely to puncture their targets when they crit, without us changing how this feature works. I really like that. One caveat though, this type of attack has no effect on creatures that are formless or creatures that are gargantuan in size. I think this is important because if you don't have a distinct body with tangible organs and vital bodily fluids contained in certain places, getting impaled doesn't really matter. And this also works well with exhaustion because a lot of constructs and undead that do have distinct forms but don't have important bodily fluids are already immune to exhaustion. And I wanted this feature to affect huge creatures because my brain based it on prehistoric humans using spears to collectively wear down huge mammoths and other megafauna, but I still believe that a gargantuan purple worm probably wouldn't notice. And that's piercing weapons. Let's move to bludgeoning, crushing. This mighty bludgeoning weapon can overpower creatures in battle. And don't get nervous when you hear the word overpower. I think this one's pretty balanced too. When you roll a critical hit on an attack with this weapon, and you roll an 8 or higher on at least 1 damage die, you can choose to shove the target 5 feet back or knock them prone. Same structure and requirements as the previous one, same question about D6 weapons, but now instead of causing exhaustion, we're knocking targets around or to the ground. To me, this is really fitting for our blunt, bludgeoning attacks. And yeah, we're kinda dipping into fighter Battlemaster territory here because they have maneuvers for pushing and tripping, but I think of this as allowing those characters to double down on those fun actions, or freeing them up to choose some other more interesting maneuvers, with these being covered by their weapon of choice. Also, there's an extra layer here. If you roll a 10 or higher on a damage die, the target is also stunned until the start of their next turn. Now, stunning is a slippery slope because many DMs have negative associations with monk player characters dashing around and stunning all their bad guys, but remember, this is only on a critical hit when the character or monster also rolls a natural 10 or higher on their damage die. No saving throw to slow things down, sweet natural scaling with bigger weapons. Wait, the Maul, the most powerful bludgeoning weapon, uses 2d6, not a d12 like the biggest and baddest in our piercing weapon category. This means we should either drop this damage roll requirement to a d6 and lose the stunning on the rolls of 10, or we just change the Maul to 1d12. Personally, I lean toward changing the Maul and the only other weapon that uses 2 dice, the Greatsword, to just being 1d12s. This would allow us to experiment with double dice for things like weapon material and quality, and in any case, this type of attack only affects creatures that are large or smaller, because I don't think a d8 flail should be able to knock back a huge creature. And if we do let d6 weapons use this feature, I'd probably reduce the target size to medium and smaller. Let me know what you think, and let's check out this feature for slashing weapons, then that bonus feature, dismembering. This powerful slashing weapon can grievously wound creatures in battle. When you roll a critical hit on an attack with this weapon, and you roll a 10 or higher on at least 1 damage die, you can choose a limb to be removed from that target. This type of attack has no effect on creatures that are formless, or creatures that are huge or larger. Critical hit and 10 or higher, not 8, the player character or monster gets to call their shot on an arm, leg, hand, or foot, or any appendage the target has. Of course, this one doesn't work on creatures that are formless, in other words, creatures that don't have tangible, distinct limbs, or creatures that are huge or gargantuan, because they just seem too big for this to work. You'll notice I didn't include any recommendations for what happens to the creature who loses a limb, because a giant spider, for example, will be affected very differently from a goblin or zombie or a manticore that loses a wing. There seem to be too many possible outcomes. But let me know if you think the rules should try to cover them, or maybe just provide some guidance with a sidebar for DMs in the final product. And I should probably emphasize that the definition of limb specifically does not include a head. Okay, and before we get to this bonus feature, if you're liking these ideas or feeling inspired by them, remember to like this video, and know that you can get a super simple write-up of those 3 features on a Reddit post linked below, and you can get those 3 and the bonus one coming up, and 5 other features I've already created for this project by joining my Patreon. And higher tier supporters can also view the living draft Google Doc, where I'll be adding and refining the full weapon list for the new system with all these features I currently just have scribbled in this notebook in really tiny print like a weirdo. Like cleaving through creatures. When a melee attack reduces... Oh, wait a minute. That's just an optional rule from the Dungeon Master's Guide. Yeah, and no one uses it because it takes a cool idea and makes it almost worthless in-game. Let's read it, and then I'll share my version. When a melee attack reduces an undamaged creature to 0 hit points, any excess damage from that attack might carry over to another creature nearby. The attacker targets another creature within reach, and if the original attack roll can hit it, applies any remaining damage to it. If that creature was undamaged and is likewise reduced to 0 hit points, repeat this process, carrying over the remaining damage until there are no valid targets, or until the damage carried over fails to reduce an undamaged creature to 0 hit points. Pretty cool. Leftover damage can be used to attack more targets, but it requires you to reduce each creature from their full hit points to 0 hit points to work, when in fact, there's no good reason why this would only work if the creatures start with their max HP. And this version does work with any melee weapon, but I find it strange that you could cleave through multiple enemies with a short sword, for example. So here's my idea, cleaving. This mighty slashing weapon can strike multiple creatures with a single attack. When your attack with this weapon reduces a creature to 0 hit points, you can divert any remaining damage to another creature of your choice within your reach if the initial attack roll also hits the chosen creature. I currently have this one marked as an optional feature for the halberd, great axe, glaive, and great sword because I can imagine those slashing weapons literally cleaving through multiple targets. But check out this video to hear all the best weapon ideas people shared in the survey. Remember to get your 15% off at Only Crits, and keep building.